All right. Welcome, everyone. Um, we'll just wait a minute while people join. All right. Thanks for everyone joining today. We'll just give it to 2:02 and then get started. So in the meantime, thank you again for joining us. Hopefully you were able to attend preparing for the MCAT Part 1 that Dr. Brittany Hardy gave. And I want to go ahead and take a minute just to go ahead and introduce the OIT staff members that are here. Dr. Brittany Hardy just waved. She is a pre-med advisor, as well as Dr. Natasha Hill, who's joining us as well, who helps me teach the CARS workshop series. And then I'm Gail Siebold. I'm a scientific skills coach in the Office of Intramural Training and Education. So it's great to see everyone, and thanks for joining. So while we're getting started, I want to go ahead and have people post in the Q&A your IC, and also maybe one concern that you have about CARS. So CARS is the section where, a lot of people really struggle because it requires a different way of thinking and a different type of analysis. So it's one of the scores that people potentially have the hardest time changing if it's one of their lower scores. And so I'm going to give people a second while they're posting in the Q&A. But what's something that concerns you about CARS? Something that you notice when you're studying that you were maybe wondering about or wanted to work on? All right, and I'm noticing I don't have access.
So I can read some for you, Gail.
Sure.
Okay. One fellow says, I always average like one or two wrong with every question, usually due to a bad passage comprehension.
All right.
And
Yeah,
some other people are still typing.
okay. If we misjudge what the passage is saying, that can mess us up when we're trying to answer the questions. And we'll talk a little bit more about that.
Understanding the passage quickly, I agree with normally getting one or two questions wrong for various reasons, another fellow said.
Okay. Yeah, so timing is an issue. And then, eliminating the questions down to, two, and then possibly selecting the wrong one. And so sometimes it's a matter of selecting the the least wrong answer, even though that may seem counterintuitive. And so we're going to talk a little bit about how to get to that point. Um, so,
Mm. And timing again with a couple of other fellows,
okay.
especially when you think about the denser passages taking a longer time to read and maybe having to reread those, and then people struggling with the beyond the text questions.
Right. Yes. So sometimes a particular type of question really gives you a hard time. Um, Great. Thanks. I appreciate everyone putting that in the chat and sharing their thoughts. Um, and so today we're going to talk about different strategies for attacking and addressing cars. And in general, you may have tried some of these strategies, but some of them you may not have tried. And so we want you to try different things and see what works for you. And just keep in mind that sometimes you might have to give it more than one attempt. You know, sometimes you might have to try it several times to give it a chance. Um, and so in addition to these strategies, we're going to talk a little bit about resources like Khan Academy. And it's a free resource, so it's a great resource to use. And then we're also going to talk a little bit about some of the Princeton strategies that we find helpful, and then go over a few other resources at the end. Um, and so that's the general outline of what I'll cover today. Um, and we'll be focusing on the cars section, which is the second section of the MCAT. And it really requires your brain to switch gears. It's different than the first section, and it's something that you definitely need to practice. You probably know a lot of this information, that it is 9 passages. And that they're split 50-50 between social sciences and the humanities. So you have a total of 90 minutes with 5 to 7 questions per passage. And so that's about 10 minutes per passage. One things that we really want to emphasize, and I'll be talking about today, is that for the purpose of the test, for each passage, what's in the passage is the absolute truth. It doesn't require for you to have background information about the field. And sometimes if you do, it might actually be to your disadvantage. So again, you want to focus on what the is in the passage, because, it might be that the author's opinion or is different than what you may be familiar with, and that can get us tripped up. And so for the purposes of the test, the passage is the absolute truth, and it doesn't matter what you actually know about the subject. It's really the author's opinion and how it's stated that's important. And so the AMC has a lot of new materials, and these can be very helpful resources because, they're the closest to the actual test. They have a new CARS diagnostic tool, which is $25, but free if you qualify for the Fee Assistance Program, or FAP. And it's 28 passages, and it has work examples. It has videos and a diagnostic tool that really helps you differentiate and figure out where your gaps are and what types of questions that you struggle with the most. So this is something to consider. It can be very helpful to kind of analyze some of your weaknesses and strengths, and it's different than CARS Pack 1 and CARS Pack 2. The material does not overlap with them. So some general tips as you're thinking about studying for CARS, especially at the beginning, is that we want you to first focus on accuracy. For those of you who are taking the MCAT in January and March, you still have a lot of time. And so that's why we do these workshops at this time, so that you can take a step back and kind of pause and work on your accuracy so that you're not developing bad habits, and then work on your speed. So at this point, we want you to get rid of your timer and don't work on your speed, but focus on accuracy. So first do your passages completely untimed. Even if it takes you 30 minutes to do a passage, if you get all of the answers correct, then it tells you you're interpreting the passage right. And so that can be more effective studying than rushing and getting bad habits. But once you've done that, then we do suggest that you use a timer, but have it count up instead of down, and see how long things are taking you. Again, we don't want your accuracy to go away, so try to do them as accurately as possible. And then you can start working on your speed. And at first, only do a couple passages at a time. Again, we want you to do them slowly, focus on accuracy, and build up your endurance. And so initially, try to do 2 to 3 passages every day. And then, immediately look at the answers that same day, so that you are also kind of beginning to analyze and see, not only why our answer is right, but why are the other answers wrong? Or, if you did get a question wrong, why did you get it wrong? Why was another answer better? So again, set time daily aside for cars. A lot of times people, kind of ignore cars and don't make the time. So, please, start now. And another thing about cars is, people sometimes lose patience reading. And so we really want you to start the passage with energy. So each passage you attack, you want to sit up straight and be alert. And you want to be excited about the material. And so if you do those things, that helps you, focus and concentrate. And another thing we want you to do is we want you to be confident. Sometimes, we think, oh, I hate philosophy, and I don't really like art history or other types of passages. And then when you get to those, you automatically think, oh, I'm not going to do well on these. And so try to have a positive mindset and be confident. We also want you to mind the timing. And part of that is taking a couple seconds before you start to kind of clear your thoughts. 5 seconds to focus. Sometimes we're thinking about that previous passage or the one that we did two passages before. So take a couple deep breaths and then kind of clear your mind and focus on your new passage. Again, we want you to concentrate on the main idea, not so much the details. And we'll talk more about this. Because only about the third of the questions are going to be basic information. A lot of them are going to be about the main idea, the tone, creating an image of the author and what is the author thinking. So, while you're reading, you might think, what does the author look like? Or what's their facial expressions? Are they happy? Are they angry? So these are just some different ways to kind of keep you engaged as you're reading. You also want to adjust your reading speed. From college, that when you're reading, and also, in lab, that not all pieces are equal. So certain parts of a may be more important than others. So read the first sentence of each paragraph, and slow down, because a lot of times that first sentence can be very important. Sometimes it's a topic sentence, not always though. And then, you know, speed up for the rest of the paragraph. You might read, the first paragraph and the last paragraph a little bit more slowly, because a lot of times they kind of summarize what's going to be in between. But then, when you come across to other parts of like transition words, or for those of that you that like to read the question stems, you'll slow down on those, because a lot of times they contain important information as well. So you kind of want to practice this as you're reading. So here's one strategy that I recommend you try multiple times, because it can be a good way to help you read through the passage without having to go back and reread things, and getting stuck on certain words and rereading the same sentence multiple times. And so this is what I want you to do. It's kind of an overview of the passage. You're going to read the first and the last paragraph first, and then you're going to skim the passage by reading the first sentence of each paragraph. And then after that, you'll scan the questions related to the passage, just the stems. We don't want you to read the answers. And then you'll read the entire passage. And so that will kind of give you a preview of the passage, and then you'll do that deep active reading last. And then finally, you'll go and you'll answer the questions. And so, this will give you kind of a good idea of what the main idea is and what the author's tone is. And, help you move through the passage quickly, with some repetition. Now, there are times on the right-hand side, and we want to emphasize initially, do it without the timing. Again, we want you to focus more on accuracy. So, you try it a couple times, maybe do it on one passage a day, and try other techniques on the other passages, but so that you see, how it works for you, and that try to get down so that you're getting, 4 out of 5 right, or 6 out of 7 questions right. But for those of you that, like that repetition or kind of feel like you get caught up in the words, that strategy can really help. So give it a try. We also want you to work on increasing your reading speed, but with comprehension. Again, we don't want you to be a super speedy reader. You don't need to do that. That's not gonna save you too much time because you're actually going to want to spend most of your time on answering the questions. But you can do things like read materials that are equivalent in complexity as the Cars passages, like the several newspapers, including the New Yorker, the Atlantic Monthly, the Economist. These are all complex um, articles, and they can help you practice with your reading. We also recommend that you do the Jack Weston Daily Cars practice question. This is a free resource. And so if you haven't signed up for it yet, we do recommend that you get that, because it also is very similar in format to what you see on the MCAT. One thing that we know also is that we can lose focus when we're reading. When you get to that, seventh passage, and that can cause you to slow down too. And so sometimes doing things like using your hand as a guide can help you with your focus as you're reading. And so you can either use your fingers or a pen, and use that to guide your eyes as you're reading along, whether or not you're reading from paper or from the screen, to help you maintain your focus. And if you move your pen a little faster, that actually helps you increase your speed as well. And so again, we do want you to still maintain your comprehension, so don't try going super fast, but over time you might get a little bit faster. And also, if you kind of focus on reading words in chunks instead of individually, that can help you if you're looking at kind of 3 words at a time, rather than word for word. And so practice that as well. And then if you want to, you can keep track of your progress. You can read for a minute with comprehension and then count how many words that you were able to read in that minute. Now, I want to talk next a little bit about Khan Academy. Again, this is a free resource, and it has a really good intro video about the car section. They talk about the different question types, how you can go about answering them, keeping track of everything, and making sure you're sticking with your timing. So please take a minute to watch this video. They also have work examples, and these are great because they're similar to the examples in the CARS diagnostics tool, and that they work through the examples. Someone's narrating the videos and reading the passage and talking about how they're thinking about the questions and how they're answering them and why the answer is correct and why it might be incorrect. And so they're about 20 minutes, which is, a good short period of time. So, if you have some time when you're working in lab and you're waiting for something to incubate, you might go to one of these work examples and listen to that. Now let's move on to some of Princeton's review strategies. And this is what Princeton recommends for attacking the cars section. So we'll go through each of these. The first is ranking the passages. As you know, not all passages are equal, and for many different reasons, some of them are going to be easier or harder for you. Maybe it's because of the topic, or it's the vocabulary, or the type of questions they're asking. Or maybe it's just, again, the number, the order, you're on your 9th passage, and you're getting tired. So think about ranking them so that you can, approach them with a strategy. Consider just doing some of the easier ones first, and then, again, previewing the questions, exploring the passage with maps, and I'll talk about this strategy with you in a minute. And then, answering the questions, but also leaving a little bit of time at the end to double check. And that's partly just really making sure that you have filled in every single question. So that's kind of a summary. So with the ranking, it's, ideally you want to do the easier passages first. And so in order to do that, you might label the passages as now, later, or hard. And kind of, we've heard some of the students when they talk about the MCAT and the first time that they went to take the test, that they went in and the first 2 passages were really, really hard. And the MCAT writers do that on purpose, right? They want the transition to be difficult, and they want to see how you function, how you do things under pressure. So if those first 2 passages are hard, it's just consider skipping them, right? Just click through and then find one that's easier to do first. And that way, you with those easier passages, again, we don't want you to rush through them. We want you to take your time and get the answers correct. So again, don't think, oh, I only need to spend 9 or 8 minutes on these because it's easy. We want you to treat all the passages equally for your, as far as timing goes, so that you make sure that you get those answers correct. And so how can you tell what's easiest? Sometimes you can't. It's something you're going to need to practice. And so even with your daily practice, when you're doing those 2 or 3 passages a day, take a look at them and rank them and decide which one you'll do first or later, or that you think is, last because it's particularly hard. And, in the end, you don't get bonus points for the hard answers, right? And so if you do run out of time, or, as a strategy, some people choose to guess on one passage. And so you can decide if that's a strategy that you want to use. The main thing is that, the answers, the passages that you're reading and the answers that you're answering, you want to get as right as possible. So you want to have the time to do that. All right, so here are the first paragraphs of 2 different excerpts, and I'm going to give you a second to kind of read through these. You don't necessarily have to read them word for word, but in the Q&A, which one, whether or not it's the left one or, well, starting with the left one, say whether or not it's now or later or hard. And then also but whether or not the right one is going to be a now, later, or hard, and why. So I'll give you a couple of minutes to do that. And so I'll let you take a minute to read those. And so then Natasha, as people are starting to write their answers in the Q&A, let me know.
I will. They're not there yet.
Okay.
Alrighty, so you're getting some people chiming in. One says right one first. One says left one later, right one hard. One says left one is harder. Oops, sorry, wrong place. I would right one first and the left one second. The left one is more difficult. The right one first, the right one first. So you're getting a lot of people saying the right one would go first. And then
Okay.
a
All
few
right.
saying that they would do the left one first.
All right. Yeah. So you can see different people have different responses. Um, some people like to have certain topics. For me, the left one, the wording seems more straightforward um, than Plato. But some people want to jump right into the right one. So it may depend on your interests. All right. All right. So actually, I think I want to go back here. Okay. All right. So let's move on. Again, people have different reasons for starting with one or the other, and so you have to determine which one you want to start with. So with Princeton, their second recommendation is previewing the questions. And there are two goals with this. One is to get a sense of the passage, which lines or paragraphs to look at. So, if it says in paragraph 4, then you know that you want to pay a little more attention when you get to that paragraph. And then the other one is that it gives you kind of an overview about what the passage might talk about. And so you want to keep that in mind when you actually go and you're reading the passage. And again, I said before, you just want to read the question stems, not the choices, none of the answers, just to get that brief overview. So, some people have difficulties doing this. They like to sneak a look at the answers, or they feel like takes too much time, but give it a try and see. Right now, when you're not concerned about timing as much, see what works for you. And then the third step is to further explore the passage. And this is where you're going to actually read the passage and write down on maps, the main point, attitude, purpose, and support. And so at this point in your setting, this is going to take a long time for you because you're new to the process and you're going to think through it carefully, and it's going to seem like the writing things down is going to slow you down, but it's fine. We want you to, again, not be worried about your timing and really focus on these important things, because many of the answers are going to be based on the author's main point as well as their attitude. And so you really want to be able to get a clear sense of that. And so over time, what students tell us is that, after they practice, they stop writing down everything, and they start having more of a mental map. And so that they just very quickly in their head are able to kind of think about what the main point is, and maybe they'll write down a few key words about the attitude, but not spend as much time. But again, it can take some practice to get to that point. So why are maps important? Well, so the main point is the core of what the author is trying to communicate. And the main idea of each paragraph is going to kind of build up to the main purpose or idea of the passage. And so we want you to keep in mind that the main idea of each paragraph is the bottom line and the context of this particular passage. And so when you get to the end of each paragraph, you want to write down a couple of notes about what the main point was, and what the author was trying to communicate. So the main point can be used to help eliminate answers that are out of scope. And it's something to keep in mind that, the main point is also tends to be scattered throughout the passage. It's not in just one place. And so at the beginning, when you're practicing, you may tend to state the main point too broadly or define it too narrowly. So it does take some practice. And you'll get better over time. The second thing you're going to write down is the author's attitude. What is the author's tone throughout the passage? Is the author a critic or an advocate, or a neutral observer. And a lot of times the author is not going to be neutral in these passages. They're going to have either a slightly more positive or slightly more negative view or tone. And so you're going to be asking yourself, how negative or how positive is their opinion? It's something to be aware of because they rarely state their attitude directly. And so when you get it to the questions, you'll have to kind of have that in your mind. And knowing the main point or the primary purpose, or when you're tackling new information, having an idea of the attitude can be helpful, especially in those strengthening and weakened questions, because that will help you when you're trying to figure out the correct answer. And so again, the main point, the attitude, and then P for purpose. And so you want to think about, what is the purpose of each paragraph? What role does it play in the structure of the passage, and how do the paragraphs connect? You also want to think about the purpose of the full passage. Why did the author write it? Are they trying to compare and contrast theories? Are they talking about something that is contrary to their opinion? Are they using another person to talk about something to support their opinion? And so if you have, a sense of the purpose, that's going to help you interpret the passage overall. You want to think about, why did the author write it? Was it to follow the evolution of an idea? Is it describing the process of something? And then finally, what is the purpose of the support that's used throughout the passage? What is the larger claim that is being supported? And so what do I mean by support? So a lot of times the author will use different evidence throughout the passage to make a point, or to support their claims, and to construct the passage overall. And so support can be things like examples, generalizations, steps, comparisons, or statistics. They might mention a study, or there may be a different definition, or a quote, or a general opinion, or even an anecdote. So these are all examples of support, or evidence that's going to be used by the author. And so here is another example. And let's go ahead and try something. For those of you whose name starts with an A to G, I want you to do the first bullet point and think about what the main point is, and is it expressed as a topic sentence? For those of you whose names are H to R, do the second bullet point. And if you're an S to Z, answer the third bullet point. What is the language or paragraph structure? And what's the evidence from the claims? And so go ahead and take a minute to read through this paragraph. And then respond to your bullet point. All right. So as people are finishing reading, think about the main point and what is the evidence that the author is using to support the main point. And what language or structure are they using to kind of distinguish those? All right, thanks. People are starting to put in some responses. All right, so Sarah's saying that the author believes that people are looking at Nietzsche's work as poetic rather than something that impacted the refining of Greek culture. Question mark. He wants people to look beyond the art and see the significance of his work. All right. Thank you for sharing that. That's Nietzsche is not easy. So And then we have Jasmine says the evidence supporting the main points can be broken down into two main components. There's no historical portrait of Greece after the Clisthenian reforms. I probably did not say that right. That the founders of the opera were revolting against the church and engaged in sub rosa glorification of natural man. So I guess Jasmine is kind of focusing on some historical evidence. What are some other types of support or evidence? What about things like punctuation? Okay, so Sarah says the author seems to respect Nietzsche's work by the words, the wording, the real thrust and importance, and so that's all right. What about less maybe philosophical evidence, maybe just kind of straightforward evidence, um, especially in the last half. Just simple, the fact that they're using quotes, right? There's also certain words that are in italics, so those words are being emphasized more. Um, so, so again, um, we have examples, we have some anecdotes, and so we have quotes, and so as you practice this, you'll be more familiar with the different types of support. And I have to say that, yeah, Nietzsche isn't the easiest to start off with. So thank you for contributing your thoughts on that. All right. So, so the next step, after we've gone through ranking and previewing and exploring the passage, and then doing the maps, next you're going to answer some questions. You're gonna, and I just want to say again, there's some kind of suggested times again of how long you would take to do each of these steps. Again, initially, we want you to kind of ignore those and not worry about your timing. But at a later stage, you might go back to those suggestions. And so the AMC break down the questions into three question types, while the Princeton Review breaks question types down into 10 question types. And so the AMC questions are the foundations of comprehension and reasoning within the text and reasoning beyond the text. And so you can watch the Khan Academy question type video again to kind of really see how they approach each of those question types. But today I want to focus on the breakdown of, the 10 question types that you might also see. So there's some specific questions. There are those that are retrieval, or some of them are inference. With the specific questions, these will require specific answers. So that's something that you'll be thinking about when you answer those questions. And those tend to be to have choices that are if they're really broad, maybe they're right, but they're really broad, and so it may not be the right answer, and vice versa. So whereas with general ones, they're gonna be more about tone and attitude and the main idea and the primary purpose. So with the general questions, they require more general answers. And so if there's something that's very specific, then even if it's right, it may not be the correct answer for that particular question. We also will have reasoning questions, which will be about the structure of the passage, and they may be asking you to evaluate something. And then you also have application questions, which can be very challenging, and they're going to be about a third of the questions that you're going to be asked, and they tend to be the ones about strengthening, weakening, new information, and analogies. And so here's how we recommend that you answer the questions. First, read the questions word for word, and do this slowly, especially at first, to make sure you read everything correctly. Because if you read the question wrong, your chances are you aren't going to read it, answer it correctly. And then the next thing we want you to do is to paraphrase the question in your head. Then go back to the passage only if you need to, and that's usually only for specific answers. And then we want you to answer the question in your own words. And so we want you to do all four of these before you go on to actually read the answer, the options, okay? So, and that way you kind of have an idea of what you think the answer will be before you even look at what they have as your options. And so you're going to kind of pick the one that's closest to the right answer that you came up with in your head. And many times if you do see an answer and you say, oh, is that correct? Did I miss something? And, it may be that they're just trying to throw you off. And so maybe, again, if it's matches up with your answer that you came up with in your own words, and it's based on the map that you wrote, then that's usually the best choice. And also the least wrong choice. And so let's talk a little bit more about this least wrong choice. If there's any part of the answer that's incorrect, then the whole thing is wrong, okay? So here, again, you're picking the least wrong choice. you're going to read the answers word for word and eliminate any with inconsistencies. And then you're going to potentially reread the question stem and reread parts of the passage only if you need to, or only a small piece of it. You don't want to spend a lot of time going back. And then again, use your maps to eliminate your attractors. All right. And so, okay. Here's how we're going to use this process of elimination. If it's inconsistent with the map that you wrote down, then cross it out. If it's inconsistent with your own answer, again, that's a good indication you should cross it out. And it's in most cases, if you read the passage correctly, and you've done your maps correctly, that should really help you to be able to answer the question and eliminate the attractors. Because the AMC, they really like to give you answers that are out of scope, that are end up being attractors that are pulling you in the wrong direction. So you want to avoid those. And if it's too extreme, if it's those can be also wrong as well. So pay attention. And sometimes, they're going to give you decoy answers. One of the strategies is to, kind of make you think that you that you didn't understand the passage. And again, remember that it's not necessarily that you didn't, it's that they're giving you a decoy response or answer. And so don't waste your time going back and rereading the passage. Just you want to stick to your maps and to the right answer that you came up within your head. All right, and so then also, they do have some different question formats. So in addition to there being different types of questions, there are also different question types. You have your direct questions, which tend to be very straightforward. The accept, least, not questions that often kind of ask you for the opposite of what is expected in the answer. And then you have some Roman numeral questions that you might want to, write down the Roman numerals and scratch out the ones that you know are wrong. So again, pay attention to these as you're answering them. If you're answering one particular type or format inconsistently, you want to go back and kind of figure out what you're doing with those and what's going wrong. So again, the general versus specific. General questions really require general answers, and specific answers or questions require you to go back and look into the passage to get the answers. So they want a specific answer. And so with the general questions, you can probably use your maps and you don't have to go back to the passage. And so keep that in mind so that you're not spending a lot of time going back to the passage when it's not necessary. So here are some examples of the different types of questions. With the retrieval, it may say something like, according to the passage states, which of the following statements is not mentioned. And so these, you might have to go back to the passage. Inference, it can be inferred. The author implies or suggests an underlying assumption that it can be concluded that. And so with the inference questions, they kind of require you to make connections and focus more on the main point when you're looking at your answers. Again, with your main idea and primary purpose questions, they can sound like this: the main idea, the central thesis, the author's primary purpose. So they're fairly straightforward. And then the tone and attitude questions: the author's tone is, the author's attitude towards, what is the tone? And again, this is something that you can use your maps and to help you answer. With your structure questions, the author probably mentions the controversies surrounding Brown's ideas and order. The author describes Brown's unique methodology in order to make a point that. And so this is, again, focused on the P in the maps, the purpose, and the different supports of those different paragraphs and kind of how they're all structured together. So again, you'll want to use your maps, and if you're fully understanding the purpose of the evidence, that will help you to answer these structured questions and figure out the purpose of the paragraphs. Next type of question is evaluate questions. One example is the author's claim regarding, is the author's claim regarding X well supported? The author's argument is flawed, or is the author's argument flawed? The author concluded that, the author supported, the support offered for this conclusion is, and so again, you're kind of evaluating the author's argument and how it's supported. And with your strengthening questions, these provide support and help kind of strengthen the author's argument and what the author is trying to say. And so here are some examples. Which of these would provide for the best support? Which of these would most strengthen? And so, so if you don't have a clear idea of what the author is trying to say, it may be difficult to answer these types of questions. And then finally, with the weekend questions, these tend to be a little bit more tricky. Because again, a lot of these questions are calling into the question the validity of the arguments, or they're trying to weaken or undermine. And so some examples are, which of these would call into question, the author's statements. So, which of these, if true, would undermine, weaken. So again, if you have that map with that main point, it will help, because a lot of times these weakened questions are double negatives. And so you're kind of, it's easy to get tripped up on that. So with new information questions, these will give new information that was never stated in the passage. And so they ask you to apply information in some way. And then analogy questions, again, give new information that was never stated in the passage as an answer choice. And so they're asking you again to apply that information. All right, so after you've done all of these things, you've ranked, you've done your maps, you've answered your questions, you're going to take a couple minutes to double check. And again, you want to make sure that you're filling in all your answers. And you don't want to waste your time on previously eliminated answers. So again, this is where it gets a little bit tricky because it's very easy for people to change your answers. And so don't overthink things, don't change things if you have things already eliminated. So, and then also, this is an example of how one trainee that used to work in our office would approach the MCAT when he was studying, so that, you know, with each passage, you know, he would assign a word to kind of summarize the topic of the passage, and then he might rank the order for now, later, or hard. And you can see, you know, those really hard ones are passages 3, 4, and 5. And so, you know, if you spend a lot of time at those at the beginning, not realizing that, you know, you might not be as effective with your time. And then again, you know, some people will mark down what questions they want to come back to based on priority. And so here, that's kind of a one example of a ranking system that one person used. All right. So again, here's the summary. I also want to remind you that you will get the slides so that you can go through all these steps. But I also want to remind you that, you know, as we all know, preparing for the MCAT is difficult, and the OIT has a lot of different resources. If you haven't taken the Becoming a Resilient Scientist series, that is just starting soon, and that can be very helpful to, you know, prepare yourself as a post-bac to do science, but also to be an effective medical student as well. We also have Thriving Thursdays, which has a lot of interesting topics and skills that help kind of you deal with different challenges that you might face along the way. Some people find meditation very helpful during, especially if, you know, if they have test anxiety. So you might give that a try. There's also a number of discussion and skills groups that can be helpful on different topics as well. So we want to emphasize, you know, you don't know what will help you deal with stress until you try it. So it can be useful to try multiple things. And of course, you are all studying to be ready and prepared. So, you know, each of you might think of a mantra or a positive thought that you want to be able to repeat to yourself as you go through this process. And, think about what is an action step that you want to take towards your cards setting this week? What's something you want to accomplish? And again, I want to remind you about a couple upcoming events. One is the Q&A sessions that happen monthly on Fridays at 2. So if you do have any questions, be sure to attend that. But I also want to emphasize an online CARS prep workshop series that we'll be offering in October through December. And this will be a weekly interactive discussion group that will be 6 sessions long. And we, we'll be covering some of the information that I've talked about today in more detail. We'll give you opportunities to interact with your peers and really break down some passages and discuss them and talk about them. And so if you're interested, please be sure to sign up for that. We'll be sending out an invite to the post-bac listserv in the upcoming weeks. And then again, also, if you aren't aware of the AAMC Virtual Medical School Fair, that is coming up soon in October. So, please be sure to register for that. It gives you a chance to talk to different medical students and program directors, missions committee members, and it's a good resource. And then finally, if you are applying to an MD, PhD program, we'll have a workshop for that in November. And then in the new year, in February, we'll also be providing a writing personal statement for medical school workshop series as well. Both a workshop, but also a kind of a working group to work through the different steps. So keep all those resources in mind. And then here's my email address. Feel free to email me, but I'll also take a minute to answer any final questions. And I'm seeing Dr. Hardy put a link for the Q&A session and more information about that. And again, I will be providing slides to everyone, so you'll have the links there as well. All right. Well, thanks for your time. If you do have any questions, I think you can unmute yourself. I'm seeing, let's see. But otherwise, again, good luck with your preparation and be sure to sign up for the CARS workshop series prep so that you can meet each other and have more of a interactive class as well. And remember also that it's ice cream today for the fellows at 3:30. So you have about 12 minutes to come over to building 2. And have some ice cream. All right. Thanks, everyone.